It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when I sat in my office, glancing absent-mindedly at my phone. A small, seemingly innocuous detail caught my attention. Diane's location. She was at home. That alone wouldn't have been strange, but as a real estate agent, her schedule rarely brought her back in the middle of a workday. Something felt off. A cold unease settled in my stomach as I told my boss I needed to step out for an extended lunch. The drive home felt longer than usual, my mind running through every possibility, each one worse than the last. As I pulled up to our house, only Diane's car sat in the driveway. Maybe she had forgotten something. I reasoned. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Steeling myself, I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The house was still, but not silent. Faint voices filtered down from upstairs, voices that didn't belong to the television or phone call. I moved toward our bedroom, stopping just outside the door. The sound of muffled laughter and hushed whispers sent a sharp pang through my chest. My instincts had been right. Carefully, I angled my phone around the doorframe, its screen revealing the devastating truth. There she was, my wife, entangled with our married neighbors, John and Kevin. The bed beneath them was draped in a rubber sheet I had never seen before, proof of premeditation, of desires she had never shared with me. A cruel irony twisted in my gut as I recalled how she had once shunned my attempts at introducing something new, claiming, "I'm not that kind of girl." I had seen enough. Without a word, I stepped away and walked down to the kitchen. My hands shook, not with sadness, but with a growing resolve. I poured myself a drink and let the reality sink in. Diane wasn't just unfaithful. She was a stranger to me now, a stranger I no longer wanted. A plan formed as I stood there, staring at the reflection of the kitchen light in my glass. First things first, I quietly retrieved all but one bottle of wine from the fridge, tucking them away in a cabinet. From her purse, sitting carelessly on the kitchen table, I took 2 of her sleeping pills, ground them into a fine powder, and mixed them into the remaining bottle. With that done, I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began severing the ties that bound us. I removed her from my medical will and life insurance, split our finances, and downloaded the necessary divorce papers. If she could so easily discard the vows we made, then so could I. Upstairs, the shower turned on, the sound of water masking whatever guilt, if any, she felt. I sat in silence, waiting. An hour later, footsteps descended the staircase. From my seat at the dining table, I watched as Diane, John, and Kevin came into view. The moment their eyes met mine, I spoke, my voice steady and unwavering. "You guys are so caught. I sent the video to your wives. Have fun with your divorces." They froze. Their shock was almost amusing. John, the self-proclaimed alpha, was the first to snap out of it, his face contorting with rage. "What did you do?" he demanded. I met his glare with cold indifference. "I ended your marriage, just like you ended mine." John took a step forward, blustering threats about how he was going to hurt me. But before he could act, I calmly reached under the napkin on the table and pulled out 2 carving knives, holding one in each hand. "You feel the same way, Kevin?" I asked, never breaking eye contact with John. Kevin, paling at the sight of steel glinting in the light, shook his head furiously. "No, man, I don't want any part of this." "Then leave." I pointed toward the door with my left-hand knife. Kevin didn't hesitate. He bolted, leaving John stranded, his supposed courage wavering. "There goes your backup, John. Now it's just you and me." I took a step closer, relishing the way his bravado faltered. "I never liked you, John. Always knew you were a backstabbing piece of trash. You resented me because I saw you for what you really are." John seethed. "I'm going to take that knife away from you and what? Hurt me?" I interrupted, stepping forward again, knife raised slightly. "Try it. The second you reach, I'll drive this blade right into your gut. Or maybe I'll take your left eye instead. What do you think?" I could see the moment fear replaced anger. His hands clenched and unclenched, his confidence unraveling. "Come on, tough guy," I taunted. "Always running your mouth. Telling everyone you'd never back down from a fight. Here's your chance." I feigned a sudden lunge, the knife tip flicking toward his face. John flinched violently, his breath coming in quick gasps. Then I noticed something, his pants darkening, a thin stream running down his leg. I tilted my head, feigning disappointment. "John, you're making a mess on my floor. Get out of my house." "Screw you," he spat, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned and fled, the door slamming behind him. I watched him disappear down the street, shaking my head. "Pity?" I murmured. I really wanted to watch him suffer. Turning my attention to Diane, I found her standing there, pale and trembling. I forced a cheerful smile. "Come on, dear. Let's have a chat. Be careful, don't step in tough guy's mess." I reclaimed my seat at the dining table, slipping the knives back under the napkin. Diane, still visibly shaken, hesitated before sitting across from me. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I didn't bother looking at her. Instead, I slid the stack of papers across the table. "Yes, you are. You're a very sorry excuse for a person." Her mouth opened, likely to sputter some pathetic excuse, but I cut her off. "These are divorce papers. This is a no-fault state, so we'll split everything 50-50. You get the house. I keep my 401k. Our finances are already separated. No alimony." Her momentary fear faded, replaced by indignation. "No way. I know my rights. You make way more. I want alimony in the house." Without a word, I turned my phone screen toward her, pausing the video at the most damning moment. Her face paled. "Would you like to see the video your parents, family, and friend will see? In fact, I think any future boyfriends might find it illuminating. So much for that rich bank account of your dreams." Her breath hitched. "That's blackmail." "Is it?" I mused. "Funny. I simply sent the video to John and Kevin's wives. They must really hate you for ruining their families." I gestured to the papers again. "Sign them. It's the best deal you're going to get. The longer you take, the more likely the video goes public." Defeated, she signed where indicated. "Good. I'll file these today." I stood, stretching slightly. "I'm moving out. I'll be in and out over the next few days. I took the rest of the week off, so just leave me alone while I pack." She squared her shoulders. "I'm not letting you take whatever you want. I'm watching." I met her eyes, my expression unreadable. "Then watch. It won't change anything." As I stepped through the front door, the weight of finality pressed down on me. The courthouse visit had been swift, the papers now officially filed. A small rental van sat in the driveway, ready to carry away the last remnants of a life I was leaving behind. Inside, Diane lounged on the couch, a nearly empty glass of wine in her hand. She was dressed provocatively, as if this was just another night of playful seduction. I pulled out my phone and hit record. "You might want to change," I said, my voice calm, measured. She smirked, shifting in her seat in a way she knew would usually get a reaction. "Don't you still love me?" I didn't answer. I wanted to. I wanted to meet her games with sharp words, to call out her desperation disguised as confidence. But silence was my weapon now. It was slicing deeper than any insult could. Her smirk faded as the weight of my indifference settled over her. "You know you'll miss me." I let my eyes linger on her just long enough to convey my disdain, then turned and headed upstairs. The bedroom felt hollow as I pulled out a suitcase and began packing. The rustle of fabric and the soft click of zippers filled the room. Diane followed, draping herself across the bed like a cat, watching me with lazy amusement. For 20 minutes, she cycled through her tactics, excuses, apologies, flirtation. She told me she missed me, that things could be different, that she could be better. When none of it worked, she got bolder. I felt her move behind me, pressing her body against my back, her hands reaching to encircle me. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "I'll treat you better." I kept packing. No flinch, no sigh, no acknowledgement of her touch. It took a long moment for her to understand that I was truly done. With a frustrated exhale, she stepped back. Then her voice sharpened. "Maybe if you'd been a better husband, I wouldn't have needed other men." I folded a shirt. If you paid more attention to me, we wouldn't be here. I zipped the suitcase. Her voice followed me as I carried a box downstairs. You're never going to reconcile with me until you apologize for treating me so badly. I walked past her, her words as meaningless as the clink of ice in her empty glass. She flopped back onto the couch, wine bottle at her side, television flickering before her. By the time I was done moving boxes, she was asleep, her head tilted awkwardly against the cushion. Curious, I examined the bottle, nearly empty. A slow smile spread across my face. I leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Diane." Nothing. I nudged her shoulder. No response. I loved it when a plan came together. Her wedding ring slid easily from her finger. I slipped it into my pocket, then reached for her phone, switching it to airplane mode before tucking away in a drawer. One by one, I closed the blinds, covering every window, ensuring no wandering eyes could glimpse inside. The front door, with its inset glass, got a thick black blanket. The garage windows, too, were obscured. The doorbell was disconnected. As the night stretched on, I packed with methodical precision. Her expensive jewelry was the first to go. Then, the kitchen, a room she had treated as a shrine, filled with high-end appliances and utensils she had refused to let me touch. By the time I was done, only the hollow shell of her curated life remained. She stirred once, mumbling in her sleep. I watched her for a moment, then retrieved another of her sleeping pills, crushing it into a fine powder. Tilting her head slightly, I let the powder slip into her open mouth, following it with a trickle of wine. She swallowed instinctively, then sighed softly and sank deeper into unconsciousness. Every 6 hours, I repeated the process. By morning, she was still completely out. I made myself breakfast, took my time enjoying the crisp air of the backyard, then went back inside and gathered more of my belongings. Before taking another trip to the storage unit, I carried Diane outside and settled her into a lounge chair. The sun was bright, the sky an endless blue. I strung a rope between the trees, hanging large beach towels as if we were simply drying them out. In truth, they provided a convenient barrier, shielding her from the view of any nosy neighbors. She looked peaceful, her body soaking in the sun. Every 6 hours, another dose. Every hour, a slight adjustment to her chair, ensuring she remained in direct sunlight. Around noon, someone pounded on the front door. Peering through a gap in the curtain, I saw 2 women, Kevin's and John's wives. Their voices were shrill with fury. "Come out, you home wrecker. You can't hide forever, you terrible person." I smirked as they rattled the side gate, but the padlock held firm. With no sign of life inside, they eventually left. By nightfall, Diane's skin had turned a deep, angry red. Blisters were beginning to form. I carried her back inside, placing her gently on the couch and switching on the ceiling fan. The process repeated the next day. By the time she finally woke, the pain was unbearable. She staggered to the back door, confusion written across her face. "Diane, what happened to you?" I feigned concern, helping her onto the couch. "You're so sunburned. Here, drink this." She took the glass of water without question, swallowing another dose before passing out once more. As she slept, I erased the last traces of my presence. The empty wine bottles were washed and discarded. The glass she drank from was scrubbed clean. The towels were taken down, the padlock removed, the blinds reopened. The house was returned to its pristine, untouched state. At 8 p.m., I nudged her gently. No response. An hour later, I tried again. This time, she screamed, "Don't touch me." "Diane, I need to take you to the hospital," I said urgently. "You fell asleep in the sun. You're badly burned." Her swollen face twisted in pain. Where am I?" "You're at home, but we need to get you help." She barely managed to slip on her robe before I carried her to the car. Her feet were too scorched to walk. At the hospital, the doctor took one look at her and pulled me aside. "How long was she in the sun?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I moved out recently. Came back for some things and found her like this." She has second-degree burns across her entire front. Possibly some third degree in a few spots. Severe sun poisoning. We're hydrating her, but it's going to take time to assess the full extent of the damage. I nodded, my face appropriately concerned. A nurse approached. She was young, pretty, with kind eyes. Are you the husband? I glanced at Diane through the window, wrapped in gauze, her body a canvas of scorched regret. Ex-husband, I corrected with a small, satisfied smile. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. When the nurse approached, clipboard in hand, I barely glanced up. Well, can you provide her insurance information? She asked. Nope, I replied flatly. I drop her for my insurance. I don't think she has any other coverage. You'll have to ask her when she wakes up. And with that, I turned on my heel and left the hospital, not looking back. The next day, as I was packing up my belongings, 2 police officers knocked on the door. One stood in the entryway, asking questions, while the other casually wandered to the downstairs, his eyes lingering on the kitchen and laundry room. He seemed particularly interested in those areas, taking his time as he inspected them. Finally, the first officer spoke. Can we ask you some questions about your wife's sunburn? His tone was professional, but there was an unmistakable hint of curiosity beneath it. You mean my soon-to-be ex-wife, Diane? I corrected, arching an eyebrow. We're divorcing. The officer nodded slightly. I see. Can you tell me when you last saw your wife before she was sunburned? That would be Thursday. I stopped by a few times to grab some of my things. She was sitting on the couch. Could you tell if she had been tanning that day? Yes. She had a nice red tint all over. What time was this? Around 8 p.m. And how were you able to determine the extent of her tan? I smirked. She was undressed. The officer gave me a measured look. I caught her cheating on Wednesday, with 2 of my neighbors, no less. I continued. She was trying to convince me not to go through with the divorce. I see. He jotted something down in his notebook. And when did you next see her? Friday morning. I stopped by to get more of my stuff. Was she tanning then? Yes. She was already outside when I arrived. As soon as she saw me inside, she came in undressed, drunk, and full of regret. I shook my head. She tried to persuade me again, but I wasn't interested. She got mad when I refused. I gathered my things and left. She was back out in the sun when I drove away. She had a bottle of wine with her. Does your wife drink often? She usually has a couple of glasses of wine while tanning. But when I found her Friday night, there were 3 empty bottles on the counter. She doesn't usually go through that much unless she's drinking with friends. She does drink more when she's depressed, though, and she was definitely depressed, knowing I wouldn't stay married to someone unfaithful. Can you give us the names of the friends she normally tans with? I can, but they aren't her friends anymore. I replied dryly. Oh, the 2 guys I caught her with? Those were their husbands. The officer exhaled through his nose, nodding as he wrote. I see. Your wife claims you drugged her and left her in the sun. I let out a short, humorless laugh. She blames me for her own stupidity. I always warned her not to drink when she took those damn sleeping pills. So your wife takes sleeping pills? Yes. She has a prescription. Pops them like candy when she wants to sleep, when she's depressed, or when she's in pain. Honestly, she likes to mix them with alcohol. It gets her high as a kite. The officers exchanged glances before closing their notebooks. Well, thank you for your time. As they turned to leave, I gave them my best puzzled expression, a little touch of curiosity just to sell it. Honesty was always the best policy with the police. After all, the moment they were gone, I swapped out my small moving van for a larger one. I needed the space for furniture and garage items. By Monday, the house was up for sale. I anticipated needing the leverage soon. 2 days later, my phone rang. Diane. Honey, can you bring me some clothes? Nope, not happening, I said without hesitation. Why don't you ask John or Kevin to run errands for you? Honey, I need your help. Can't you forgive me? Just a little? I snorted. You already got your little bit of help from me. I carried your sorry ass to the car and drove you to the hospital. Don't call me again. I ended the call. By the time she got out of the hospital, I had taken everything from the house except for her oldest clothes, some makeup, our bed, and one final parting gift, a rubber sheet I found buried at the bottom of the laundry basket, hidden in a large Ziploc plastic bag. I left the bed completely bare. No sheets, no blankets, no pillows, just that unwashed rubber sheet. I made sure to shut off the central air before I left, ensuring the house would be nice and toasty for my sunburned ex-wife's return. What I wanted, I stored in a rental unit. What I didn't want, I sold or trashed. I burned the entire wedding album, deleted every digital copy, and torched her wedding dress for good measure. Diane sent me hundreds of texts and emails, mostly apologies, but plenty of threats too, especially when she returned home to find it stripped bare. She tried to fight the divorce, claiming she had signed the papers under duress and that I had stolen everything. She even demanded alimony. But when I threatened to stall the sale of the house and withhold the proceeds, she backed down. She needed money too badly. She became a vampire after the ordeal, avoiding the sun at all costs. Even the heat against her clothing made her wince. She had to quit her job as a real estate agent. Who wants to be shown a house by someone with blistered, peeling skin? A month after the divorce, there was a pounding on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Diane. I hadn't spoken to her since the hospital. She looked like she'd been drinking. I sighed, knowing this day would come. When I opened the door, she pushed past me without hesitation. "What do you want, Diane?" "I want a drink." "There's a bottle of wine in the fridge." I said, "Coolly." She grabbed the open bottle, took a deep swallow straight from it, then poured herself a full glass. She sank onto my couch, exuding the same arrogant entitlement I had seen too many times. Sarcastically, I gestured to the room. "Why don't you make yourself at home?" "I will," she shot back just as snarky. She peeled off her light jacket and leaned back, revealing a tiny crop top that was basically just a bikini. But her usual confidence faltered as my eyes lingered. Her face had changed. Wrinkles and dark moles dotted her once smooth skin. Heavy peeling had left it uneven, white, red, and gray patches blending together in a rough, unnatural texture. Her nose, once delicate and upturned, was now a bumpy, scarred mess. Her body was worse. The same mottled, damaged skin stretched over her arms and stomach, the result of too much sun and too little care. Diane had always taken pride in her looks. She used them to get what she wanted. But now, sitting there on my couch, stripped of makeup, stripped of beauty, stripped of power, she was nothing but a ghost of the woman she once was. And she knew it. Diane had always been aware of her looks, conscious, calculating. I suspected part of the reason for her visit was to recapture a sense of her lost allure, to soak in my admiration like she once had. But I made no effort to hide my indifference. The years had been unkind to her, but the sunburn had done something worse. It had stolen time, accelerating what should have been a gradual fading into irrelevance. Instead of slowly adjusting to dwindling male attention over decades, she had been cast into invisibility overnight. Especially to me, she wilted under my gaze, her once effortless confidence crumbling. "What do you want, Diane?" I asked, my tone flat. She offered me a warm smile, the kind she used to use when she wanted something. "I want you to give me another chance." "Love is trust," I said simply, "and I don't trust you." "That's not fair," she argued. "I never stopped being the same housewife I always was. You should have used that energy to breathe life into our relationship, not poison it." I knew Diane well enough to recognize when she had rehearsed her words, but my response had shattered whatever carefully planned script she had prepared. Her expression flickered with surprise, then uncertainty. "What do you really want, Diane?" Her smile faltered. "I need your help." She exhaled shakily. "I have medical bills. A lot of them. I need more skin treatments. Maybe even grafts. I'm out of money." She looked up at me with sad, pleading eyes. "I still love you." I leaned against the doorframe. "Then why don't you ask Kevin or John for help? You were close to them, weren't you?" Her expression twisted, something between guilt, anger, and regret. "They're both broke, and they want nothing to do with me." I raised a brow. John came in my hotel room a few weeks after we split, she admitted. I think he thought being with me again would give him back his manhood, but he couldn't do it. I saw in his eyes. He was afraid. Not of me, of you. I let that hang between us. He stormed out humiliated, she continued. And worse, his wife saw the video you sent. She was waiting for him when he got home. She even took pictures. I had run into John's wife a few times since then. She always made sure to mention my name when talking to John, a quiet reminder of his downfall. At her request, I sent him a picture every week. Nothing incriminating, just enough for him to know it was me, enough to remind him. And Kevin, I asked. Diane took a deep sip of wine. His wife ruined him. She made sure everyone knew, sent the video to everyone he knew, even his family. She exhaled, shaking her head. I ran into him at the grocery store, just to see if we could talk. He saw me, started crying, collapsed in the middle of the aisle. The cops had to come. I could see it in her eyes now, the weight of what she had done, the realization of the lives she had shattered. She drained the rest of her wine. I tilted my head. Why don't you offer them what you did before? It worked then. She looked away. I can't be intimate anymore, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. I feigned curiosity. Why not? She hesitated. The sunburn, she finally said. Sensitive areas hurt that bad? You have no idea. Her voice wavered. I have to keep gauze pads over certain places. Even a breeze is painful. I chuckled darkly. From what I saw, you like that kind of thing. I paused. But I don't think that's what John and Kevin were really interested in. Her composure broke. Tears streamed down her face. The sunburn damaged me permanently, she sobbed. The nerves, they're dead. I can't feel anything. The doctor said it might come back, but... She shook her head, dissolving into quiet weeping. I let her cry, let her hope I might take her in my arms, whisper reassurances. Instead, I picked up her empty wine glass and handed it back to her. She sniffled, took a few gulps, and managed a weak smile. Unbelievable. Even now, she thought she could manipulate me with a few tears, a revealing dress, and a smile, as if none of it had happened, as if she hadn't ripped my heart out and crushed it underfoot. I smiled slightly, and she saw it. Hope flickered in her eyes. I stood, took her gently by the arm, and guided her to the door. At the threshold, she turned, pressing her body against mine, searching my face. Don't you still love me? She whispered. I met her gaze, and then, with quiet finality, I shut the door. Why? She pleaded. I answered through the narrowing gap. Because everything I loved about you is gone. And then I closed the door in her face.